Hello, my wonderful, wonderful friends. We have just finished up with Noah. So I was gonna do another People of the Bible video for you to kind of sum up Noah's lives. But I also found that if you keep hearing the same story over and over, you usually get the same message every time. So I was going to try and take a new angle, perhaps. But for those of you who haven't had the same story over and over, I was going to call into attention that Noah was a man of faith, that the people had never seen rain before, and the fact that God told him to build a boat, to build the ark, seemed ridiculous to most, I'm sure, because they had never seen rain. Why would you need a giant ark, especially of that size? There might have been fishermen in that day, so you would have seen boats, but nothing to that degree. And so to make this massive boat probably seemed like a waste of resources. So again, I think that's the biggest quality of Noah, is his unrelenting faith. Now, he had some weaknesses too. We had last time talked about how he had grown a vineyard and then got drunk off of its wine. And in a way, I can totally understand why, because you just witnessed a lot of death. I mean, everyone you would have known, your friends, everybody around you would have died. And that would have been a hard thing to experience. But nonetheless, it doesn't excuse the fact that he got drunk and got naked. But that was what I was going to refresh for those of you who haven't heard the story a bunch. But for those of you who have heard the story of Noah quite often, I was going to go into a little bit of evidence for how this flood came about. So a lot of people say that science disproves the Bible. I don't know if there are others like me, but I believe that science proves God's existence, that science proves that the Bible is the truth. And so today, I will be delving into a little bit of that, of how science is proving that this flood actually did happen. So without further ado, let's begin with that. So I was doing some research, and it seems that about 270 to 300 cultures, different cultures, all share a similar-ish story of a giant flood happening. And these cultures range from Asia to Africa to the Americas, like South America, North America, Europe. All of the continents, except for Antarctica, have a story of a giant flood. Now, how this story happens is different across the cultures. So across these cultures, they have these stories of a giant flood. So what might be the cause for this was that these myths, these stories that have been passed down, were actually based upon an actual event. So of course that piques scientists' interest in figuring out, was this actually an event that occurred, or was this just story? Because it seems like if 300 different cultures have the same story, that it might have happened. And as Christians who believe that the Bible is truth, we know that this occurred. So scientists have been looking at the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. So the Bible talks about the ark landing on some mountains. And those mountains, or at least those mountain ranges that we've found in the Bible, are in today's modern day Turkey. And the country Turkey is actually right around the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. So it makes sense as to why scientists would look to these two seas to figure out if the Great Flood happened. You may ask, well, how do we know that a flood could have occurred of these proportions that were talked about in the Bible? I'm happy you asked that, because that's what I'm going to try and answer. So, two scientists decided to study the sediments, or the, minerals, the rocks, or rather, sediment layers are more like sand. I guess that's a better way of putting it. So, two scientists decided to study the sediment layers in the Black Sea, and what they found was kind of interesting. So, give you some background. The Black Sea used to not be salt-based, so it didn't used to be salt water. The reason they think this is because if you go further down into the sediment layers, you actually find evidence of freshwater shells of these prehistoric creatures that were only capable of living in fresh water. So it is believed that the Black Sea was fresh water, but as we know it today, the Black Sea is actually salt water. So it's like, how did that occur? So what they believe happened from these sediments, they're able to find out that the Black Sea was fresh water, but it started to drop in sea level. So it used to be that the Black Sea had a lower sea level than the Mediterranean Sea. So the Mediterranean Sea is salt water. It was always salt water, to our knowledge. And what they think occurred was that some glaciers melted, or somehow the water level rose in the Mediterranean. And so because the water level rose in the Mediterranean, it started to get higher than that of the Black Sea's water level. So what they think happened is eventually the Mediterranean spilled into the Black Sea. The thing is that the water difference, the difference in the level of water was so great that when this Mediterranean Sea spilled into the Black Sea, it was like an oncoming tsunami. A lot of researchers are saying that they believe it was 200 times the force of Niagara Falls rushing into the Black Sea. So anything that was near it would have been wiped out. Civilizations, people, animals, anything would have probably been wiped out by the force of this water. Plus, the Mediterranean Sea is a big body of water, and it would have been able to flood quite a bit of land. So, that was about the two scientists who discovered these sediment layers. So they discovered they had fresh water, and then you go a few layers higher, and you start to see a mix, and then you go to where we see it today, and there's only saltwater shells and such. So then, go to another scientist, who I believe one of the papers I was looking at said he had discovered the Titanic. So he was using underwater robots. And so now, today's society, he was using more higher power robots. And he was going around the Black Sea, and he discovered buildings, if you will. So like people's houses. And they were pretty much perfectly intact because the Black Sea doesn't have a high oxygen content. For those of you who don't know, oxygen is why so many things erode and get torn apart, if you will. So everything was pretty well preserved, which is kind of cool. So what's interesting about this is what they're theorizing is that the Black Sea, which used to be a lower water level, it was probably surrounded by a civilization who would have farmed the land because it's a constant flow of fresh water. So your crops would have been okay. Everything would have probably grown very well around it. So what they think happened was that when the Mediterranean Sea just broke into the Black Sea, that these civilizations were just like wiped. So I don't know. It's interesting to think about that. That there is proof, if you will, that a giant flood happened. So I don't know if that, me telling you all of this, raised more questions for you, or if it answered some questions for you. So hopefully I answered some questions more than created more questions for you. I will post where I got my information so you can check my sources if you'd like. I highly encourage you to do more research on your own. If you feel like I've missed something or you have more questions, I can't promise that I will find answers to your questions, but I'm more than happy to give it a look. I like learning about these things too. But until next time, thank you so much for listening. I hope that this was very educational for you and that hopefully, if nothing else, my voice helped you relax a little. But thank you again for listening. Bye.